Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our weekly DSS break. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're here live every Thursday to talk about data science experiences and best practices with leading data professionals in a 15-minute break. I'm Anna Annison, the CEO and founder of Formulated By, home of Data Science Salon, and I'm streaming from our HQ located in the heart of Miami, right next to the Design District. And on today's DSS break, I'm really excited to sit down with Charles Irizarry, who is the CEO and founder at Phygital and also Strata.ai. And Charles has led a successful career in co-founding technology companies and focuses on topics of AI, Web3 technologies, and emerging business models. He presented a very exciting talk yesterday at our mini virtual salon. And that was all about opportunities of bringing NFTs and data science together, which is super interesting. And I'm really excited to dive deeper into this topic with him today. Thank you so much for joining us for this DSS break episode, Charles. And maybe you could tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. And thank you for having me, Anna. It's a pleasure. It's an incredible community. I just want to give a shout out to the rest of the community. It's been exciting, the conversations I've had with many of you, trading notes and war stories with other engineers and practitioners, and also talking to other leaders on the best implementation strategy for machine learning and my favorite topic, which is deep learning. And so I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. As you guys heard, my name is Charles Irizarry. My background is in distributed computing and cloud architectures. Most of my career, I've been more of a CTO type of person with a lot of the products that I've worked on. I've led several different ventures. One of the more successful ones you may have heard of called Rocker Labs, which was a venture portfolio. And what we would do is partner up with other entrepreneurs who did not have the technical background to implement their visions, and we will help them execute those ideas. And so through then, I led on to other products dealing with different kind of use cases and problems, specifically in supply chain. And so I became CTO of a company called Foodlogic for a couple of years. And we focused on supply chain traceability from provenance, from the beginning of when something gets pulled from a farm, all the way to it's a full delivered product at a restaurant, for example. And it was an exciting time. We worked with Chick-fil-A, Subway, many different quick serve restaurant brands that you guys may have heard of before. Cool. And Chipotle was one of our bigger customers, which was really exciting. And so during that kind of phase, this is around 2016, blockchain really kind of came into prominence. Largely, our solution was a traceability solution serving data scientists and helping with traceability. And then blockchain came on the block as a new technology that could be the de facto kind of supply chain traceability solution. And so I led a research group together with Tyson Foods, Subway, and a couple of others, where we really spent some resources and time researching the technology. If you think it's nascent now, blockchain, you can only imagine how nascent it was 4 or 5 years ago, where it was really, really brand new. And so we worked together closely with IBM shortly before they bought Hyperledger, which was a very famous framework back in the day for implementation of blockchain, to really kind of figure out how to use this technology in the right way. And ultimately, what I decided was blockchain is a great use case in a situation where all the stakeholders do not trust each other. So in the case of traditional supply chain, it actually didn't make any sense. Everyone does very much trust each other. You would be surprised, but supply chain is a very, very old business, and it's almost generational. And so not only are there relationships and trust between the vendors in that supply chain, that goes on for many generations of those families. And so there was no real need for blockchain in that sense. But again, with a background in distributed computing, this was an exciting new toy that I wanted to hold on to and research over the last 4 or 5 years. And most recently, with the advent of new mechanisms that were introduced, specifically NFTs, I saw new opportunities of its application. In the last couple of years, we've been researching how to introduce that. And we really wanted to make sure that there was a sustainable use case that made the most sense to leverage this technology. Before today, it only felt like blockchain was a feather trying to be a chicken, which is the joke that we used to say in the supply chain business. It's a solution looking for a problem versus a problem that needed this solution. And so that's kind of how we kind of fast forward to today, where By day, we're working on Strata AI and also a consulting firm as Brim & Company, where we consult with large companies in the implementation of machine learning and deep learning. But we work with a lot of supply chain and consumer goods and retail companies who have challenges in traceability. And so through those challenges, Phygital was born, where we used NFTs to tokenize goods and trace them through the supply chain into secondhand markets, which gives us a whole new kind of transparency to the marketplace that never existed, and how Phygital was born.
Cool. No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing kind of your progression with the blockchain and where you are today. And I know that you have a career of co-founding successful technology incubators and companies. How do you usually spot the next tech trend that's around the corner?
We stay to basic first principles. So the way that I look at it is, and it goes back to kind of how I even started in my career. I make the joke that I didn't discover technology. Technology discovered me, in the sense that I was a little bit of a troublemaker in high school. My grades weren't the best. And so I was trying to find quick ways that I can improve my GPA without doing a lot of work. And so I took a dark path and took advantage of being able to kind of write programs to change my grades in different places. And that's kind of how I started to discover software development. And then ultimately I drew into it. So I typically I look for two things. What are kind of the emerging business problems that exist? And a lot of that is just listening. And so one of the reasons why I love running consulting businesses is because they allow us to get in front of customers with real pain points, wherever they are, and just listen to them and see what this is an issue, or we're trying to solve for this problem, or we don't know how to do this and do that. And then on a separate track, pay attention to technology and how it's being developed and understand it fundamentally, not kind of the aspirations it wants to be. Like in the case of blockchain, there's a lot of high-end aspirations of what it could be. We ignore all that, and we just focus on the fundamentals of the technology. What is it? What can it do today? And what is its value prop? And so in the case of blockchain, the only thing that we felt that was really valuable about it was permanence, that it could write something to effectively a decentralized database and it's permanent. Okay, that's a value prop that we're going to put down on the side. We'll keep track of it, but we're not going to go and try to force fit it into something. We just know that it's there on our tool belt. And on the other side, just listening to customers to understand what are the issues. And so one customer that we're going to be announcing later this year, they are a large apparel brand, and they came to us with the problem of, hey, we have a large secondary market that we can't access, and it's in China. And so all our stores are located on Japan, and people buy our stuff, take it back, and they sell it whenever they want to. But a lot of our products have warranties, insurance, a lot of things that our customers that are in China cannot take advantage of. So how do we solve this problem? And so we came up with the idea of tokenizing their products with an NFT. That way, because blockchain is borderless to way it's structured, so it doesn't matter where you are. And as long as you're the NFT holder, you can act on those warranties. And so it became a wonderful use case that really kind of shines a good reason why you would want to use NFTs.
Cool. No, that's really great. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the concern about the energy consumption and sustainability. And, you know, it takes a lot of power to use blockchain technology, and a lot of people are against it. So kind of what are your thoughts about that? Because, I mean, I think, you know, that's definitely a concern for a lot of people. And I mean, obviously the technology is here. So how do we kind of solve that or kind of work around that?
Absolutely. So the first thing is, blockchain is still very much in its infancy. And as a developer in blockchain, I would say that we're still trying to figure out what's the best way to operate this technology. The way that fundamentally the most popular blockchains work is on this concept of proof of work, which requires a lot of power consumption to execute or solve for equations that relate to its cryptographic underpinning, right? And at the end of the day, a blockchain is just a database with blocks of data, and they're connected using cryptographic hashes. So you have to solve for those hashes and calculate for those hashes. That's the best way to make sure that no one can change any previous records on the blockchain. But it takes a lot of power. And so what's happening is that there's a lot of discussion about alternative ways to protect and enforce the blockchain, but not necessarily use so much cryptographic power or energy to solve for those equations. So there's another concept called proof of stake, where people put their own money and reputation on the line to enforce certain records in the database. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different implementations. There's a lot of different ideas, and some of them are coming to production very soon. So we're staying very, very close to that in terms of how that develops, which goes back to that kind of second channel of technology development. We're tracking all the different innovations from that perspective. There's a couple of chains, or what we call layer one chains, that have come out that are dramatically, they use a lot less energy, that we've partnered up. One of them is called Cadena, which I recommend everyone to take a look at. Another one is Polygon. They're also fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard of them. Yeah.
Polygon's great. And Polygon backstops a lot of their stuff into Ethereum. So though they use Ethereum, they use a lot less of Ethereum, and they create much more space so that you can store much more data on that blockchain, or that kind of side chain, which is a great value. And it also reduces the energy consumption. But there is, I can tell you for sure, there's an obsession to get to that net zero with the blockchain technology. The other thing that we're noticing, and I think this is going to benefit the problem, is, for example, if you go to Ethereum right now, and if you want to make a basic NFT just for a piece of art, you're going to be spending at least $150, maybe $200 to even mint the NFT. But in our particular use case, we're making thousands, if not millions, of products that we have to tokenize. So the cost doesn't make sense for consumer packaged goods, or even for luxury goods that we're representing. And so we're working with blockchains like Cadena, and also another one I want to mention is called Avalanche, which dramatically reduces the cost. And so in order to dramatically reduce the cost, we need to dramatically reduce the energy consumption. And if we can dramatically reduce the energy consumption, it's more profitable. And so I always make a joke that typically, if you want to solve for sustainability or reducing carbon emissions, there has to be a capitalistic motive behind it. And so in this case, it's dramatically reduced the minting cost, because we believe the future is going to be that almost every valuable asset that you own, whether it's your car, your luxury jewelry, fashion, trading cards, they're all going to be tokenized with an NFT, because they help you have a permanent record of your ownership, but also provenance of who owned it. So you'll see that it was made by this company, so you can authenticate and make sure that it's real. And then you can trace it throughout the blockchain of all the owners who had it. And so we think there's going to be a resurgence of this sustainable kind of circular economy for used goods. And so that's kind of where we see things. But absolutely, it's top of mind for us to reduce kind of power consumption, especially at this scale that we're thinking about.
Yeah, it looks like, people are working to solve that problem, which is really good.
Yeah.
And then the question I have, so I know that, everybody's really aware, especially people that have been following NFTs, that the NFT market is crashing right now for, art and the digital assets. So how is this really, so people understand, how is what you're doing different from what that is? Because I think there's definitely some confusion, because there's a lot of hype around the NFTs and, art. And now that it's kind of crashing, people are, pretty much kind of concerned and are wondering what the other use cases are. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about the difference really of how that works.
Sure. So if I know you know this, but and also so do my other friends. For the last couple of years, I've been warning them of this and saying, do not invest into these NFT art. Be careful. In my opinion, my personal opinion, I felt there was a little bit of a bubble. It's a great demonstrator of how the technology works, but I mean, I don't know, $500,000 for a Bored Ape image was a little bit much for me. And so I would advise others. And so one thing I want to explain about the history of NFTs when they first came out was they were originally just a proof of concept to show the kind of protocol to make a non-fungible token. And so the original NFTs were actually 16-bit like little images. They don't look like much, and they were the entire data set of that image was stored inside the NFT itself on the blockchain. But what people don't realize is that it costs money to create a record on the blockchain, and it costs money to store things on the blockchain. And depending on the load of that moment, you may pay transaction fees just to get it published. So it was very expensive. And so the next logical thing that people did was, okay, I won't store the image on the blockchain. I'll store a URL to the image instead. And then I'll store the image on either a decentralized or a distributed kind of network, or maybe a centralized cloud solution, but at least it's stored, which in my mind really eroded the value of the NFT, because the actual asset is the art itself, but it wasn't being stored on chain, as we say. It was being stored off chain. Regardless of how you distributed or decentralized it, it's still a mutable piece of data. So if anyone really wanted to, they could change that around. And so this latest NFT kind of craze was built off of that underpinning implementation, which is you're basically buying an NFT, but you're really just buying a database record that has a URL that points to a meta file of JSON information, and then there's a URL to your image. And that to me was nowhere sustainable. That made no sense from that implementation. And so the way that we saw it was, we thought NFTs were fantastic as a use case, very, very immature as a technology. And we needed to find partners like we have now that were ready to invest and expand the technology so that we could do much more pragmatic data storage. And so in our particular use case, as an example, when we tokenize a physical good, one of the biggest concerns that our clients have is that the end user needs to be able to authenticate that this is the good that they bought, to make sure it's genuine. One of the ways we do that is we take all the data attributes and we use a data standard from GS1. If no one's familiar, GS1 is the global standards of how you kind of structure data for CPG and supply chain goods and traceability. And so this is something that I learned at Foodlogic. I've held on to this standard, and now we're trying to use it for blockchain. And we take the product attributes of this either whether it's clothing, whether it's whatever the product is, and store it in the NFT on chain. So now the description that describes this physical product is also immutable. It's not off chain somewhere. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be changed. That's the value. It's the permanence part that we felt was the most valuable about it. And why is permanent valuable? Because then when you enter a situation where, let's say I want to sell a product to you, we don't know each other. How do I trust you? Now today we solve that by user reviews. But what if there was a more bulletproof way where I know this is the original thing from the source? And not only that, when you sell me this NFT, I also inherit the rights of the warranties. I inherit the rights of maybe the insurance. If it's an electronic good, some people buy insurance for it. You want to inherit those rights as well to take advantage of that. And so we feel like NFTs are a great vehicle for that. The best way to think about it is when we originally came up with it, my wife pitched me the idea because she's a real estate attorney. And she's like, imagine if we had NFTs for deeds instead. So instead of buying a real estate and then having to process a deed with the government, you had an NFT instead, and it'll be easy to clear title. It'll be easy to see origination. Who's the original builder of this, if they're still in business? Like, all of this information will be tied to that NFT. The transactions will be way easier, and you don't need as many people involved. And so that was like, aha, you're onto something. I don't think I'm going to change government operations today, but at least we can get started on using it to help us understand even secondhand markets, like how, because everything is published to the blockchain. And so I think we're lucky that we've kind of stumbled upon, thanks to our customers and people that we worked with, on this kind of more sustainable use case of NFTs versus what we're seeing today. And so this kind of crashing and everyone freaking out, I think it's par for the course. It was about time.
Right. Well, that's such, interesting stuff. I think we need to make a blog post out of this too, because I feel like a lot of people, this is great information for people that don't really understand NFTs. So thank you so much for sharing all this information, Charles. Sure. And you can register to the on-demand portion of yesterday's DSS virtual, and you can really dive into Charles's full presentation about combining NFTs and data science for product traceability, and you can really see how it works in more depth. It's completely free, so check that out. And thanks again, Charles. It's really great to have you. And I look forward to continuing this conversation. I think NFTs and data science, there's a lot more to be done there, a lot more use cases. So I'm really excited to continue the conversation. And I hope the rest of you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here again next week.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you to the rest of the community.
Bye.
Bye.